Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I hope you're fine, and today in this class in journalistic writing we'll move towards news and opinion writing. So the first lecture of the day, of course, will be the language of newspapers. Before I go into the details of language of newspapers, I would like to throw light on different parts of a newspaper. I mean, just pick up any newspaper and take a look of it. Doesn't matter it's Urdu or English paper. The first page, which we call as the main page of the newspaper, of course, is the most important part or section of newspaper, whether it's a serious newspaper or popular. It's the most important part, and we also call we call this page as the face of the newspaper, or also known as eyes of the paper. And of course they say eyes are what? They are index of mind. Exactly the same way the front paper, the front or the main page of the newspaper, of course, can give you also glimpses of what, of course, you will see inside. In some newspapers, where, it's the policy, actually, of the papers, they try to, write their maximum. I mean, try to, give space to as many pieces of news as possible. And then, of course, their headlines and, their, you can say, the topic sentences they would give on the front page. And then they, of course, keep on giving jump lines, Jump line means, they'll mention, the remaining part of, this piece of news is on so-and-so page. But in serious newspapers, which, of course, you can see around yourself also, they do not try to, bring a lot of traffic on the front page. Rather, they, very carefully, very analytically, the editors, they decide actually what should come on the main page. Of course, the most important news pieces, they win actually the places on the main page, on the front page. And then, of course, inside, or at the back of the newspapers, the remaining let's say comparatively, relatively less important pieces of news, of course, can make the, places. By the way, on the very front page or the main page of the newspaper, when we talk about, most important pieces of news come on the front page and or the main page, and less important, go inside or at the back of, the newspaper. Who decides what's, important and what's less important? Of course, answer to this question is that you actually decide what's important and what's less important. We use a word proximity. Well, news, there are hundreds and thousands of definitions of news. Of course, we can define it that way. But its importance, actually, we can analyze the importance of news on the yardstick of proximity. Something which is in close proximity, in your actually close proximity, that of course is important for you, and that may not be important for me. So proximity is the word which we then apply collectively. A piece of news which is in proximity of most number of people, of course, that becomes important. In proximity, we use words like let's say distance, for example. News which is important, let's say for me in Lahore, may not be important for somebody, in Karachi. So distance, of course, is one yardstick to decide which piece of news is important and which is less important. Then comes, of course, time decides. Then, to me, most important factor, which actually judges what's important, what's less important, that's, how many people are actually directly affected by that piece of news. Now, this, now, when we say affected, it's a broad term, actually. I may be affected directly or I may be affected indirectly. For example, if my country is affected, so I'll be, of course, indirectly affected. If the petrol price, for example, increases, then obviously, like, I'm directly affected, because I'm, of course, the consumer. I have to buy every day, for my car, for my, let's say, wife's car, or from, and obviously you also. So, affect is, I believe, the most important yardstick, to decide what's important, what's less important. Then, of course, distance is the second important, principle to decide important, less important. The third, of course, is time decides important, less important. So, effect of the news dominates actually, in the yardsticks, which, chooses out of many pieces of news what should come on the front page and what should go inside or on the back of the page, or, on supplements, or on, special sections, which are meant for certain, specialized, actually, pieces of news. Let's analyze, actually, first of all, what is actually the main page of a newspaper. As I told you before, the most important pieces of news will come on the front or the main page of, the newspaper, the face of your newspaper. The morning you pick up your newspaper, your eyes, first of all, meet with the front page. Those pieces of news, which out of all these yardsticks, have been decided, to be actually on the front page. On main page, we have a lot many things. First of all, at the top of the newspaper or at the top of the main page, you have newspaper's name written. Now, the name of the newspaper is, of course, called as masthead. That's the name of, the newspaper. Right, under the name of the newspaper, you have some more facts and figures, written. For example, dates are written, Islamic dates and, other English dates, they are written, then printing information is there, and, some other, like, coding is, of course, given out there. That all stuff, masthead, under the masthead, of course, you have dateline. Now, this you can see on your TV screen also. I have, sectioned out one Pakistani national newspaper, Dawn's, the main page. You can take a look, the name of the Dawn I have like labeled as masthead, and right under that, there is dateline, which as I told you before, dateline is the printing information, the day this newspaper has been printed, and maybe some other necessary internal coding, for the newspaper people. And then after this, by the way, the sides, of course, name of the newspaper is not like, extended across the whole page, actually. It's, of course, centralized, the top of the page. Now, the right and the left sides, left of the masthead and right of the masthead, we call these two spaces. In serious newspapers, usually they are empty. They are actually, nothing comes here, These are ears of the newspapers. But like now, since things are like, getting more and more commercial, things are getting commercialized, day by day. So newspapers also, like, since they have to eat also, they have to, like, run the whole show. They, of course, need some finance to cover it up. Of course, like, they go massively into, adverts. So in the ears these days also, you find the appearance of, like, small, of course, hugely, paid, advertisements. By the way, after this masthead, then we move towards the main headline of the newspaper. Of course, you must have heard of it, that there are some newspapers which are, serious, and there are popular, quality and popular, like, papers or journalism. The headline of quality newspapers, for example, is like maximum, at its maximum, extended onto 3 columns. 2 columns. So that's actually, at maximum. Headline is, extended onto, or it's spread actually onto 2 to 3 columns. Whereas in popular journalism or in popular press or popular paper, this main headline actually is spread all across the top of the newspaper. So this is of course the difference. When we be talking about news writing, of course they'll we'll discuss these things also, or in layout stuff we'll talk about it. But of course after masthead and the dateline we have now, the main headline of course either left or central or right hand, that doesn't matter, but of course all the three places are important. Usually it's put where it could really stand off the rest of the pieces of news. Main headline, of course, the most important piece of news. Of course, as I mentioned before, all the pieces of news on the front page are important. Then out of all these pieces of news, one of course is going to be the most important, the king and queen of the front page. That actually I'm talking about the main headline. You can see on this paper, main headline, government suspends wheat export. That's of course the main headline. And you can see very clearly that above the main headline, there is one more smaller headline. This we call as strap line. Now again, main headline, if there is one more headline which can qualify the main headline, or which can explain the main headline, or which can, further talk about, or which could give you more facts about, the piece of news you are going to read actually, sort of bird eye view, in other words, sort of concluding some précis sentences. See, so strap line, if secondary headline of the same story appears on the top of the headline, that's called as strap line. And if the smaller headline or the secondary headlines, appear below the main headline, they then will not be called as strap lines, they will be called as sub-headlines. Of course, a newspaper can have main headline, top on it, strap line, below it, sub-headline, that's possible. Or, it depends, they can have two, main headline and sub-headline. It doesn't matter. Of course, the news which, the size of actually the news, I'm not talking about the physical size actually, the intellectual size of the news of course will decide how many different, techniques to be used to, cover up, that, piece of news or that event or occurrence or what. After this main headline and that strap line and then sub-headline, before the story starts actually, between the story and the main headline, there is written the name of the reporter also, the one who has reported this or the one who has covered, that piece of news. This we call as, byline. Of course, byline is a name of a person actually who has covered that or who has reported, that. Of course, news which come on the front page of the newspapers, they are usually reported and covered by the most senior journalists, of that particular newspaper. Inside stories or then, the backhand or on the, supplements or of localized news, for example, they can be covered, of course, by, then different journalists. So on the front page, of course, the most senior journalists, their bylines, of course, will be, visible very much. Then, of course, after the byline, the actual show starts. The lead story, that starts. The body of the news, starts. Of course, as introductory paragraphs, then, all the sportive details. Then, of course, the concluding lines and all. The whole body, actually, the whole crux, actually, you find, of course, in the lead. You call it lead. You could also call it, splash. Now, please try to understand the difference between a lead and a splash. Splash, lead, as I told you before, the body, actually, of that very news, which you are, of course, calling the main headline or the main story, actually, on the front page. Splash means, three things. Splash is the one which has, of course, the main headline. Of course, that's the secondary thing, if there are some sub-headlines or if there are some, what you call strap lines, that's an added, actually, factor. But splash is the one which has the main headline plus the lead and the image or a picture also. If there is no picture, then that's not a splash. Now keep in mind, splash coverage or splash news, of course, it's something which is extremely important piece of news, which of course becomes the main story of your front page. It is so important that it is treated through all possible techniques. Like main headline is given. As I said, main headline can be spread onto 2 to 3 columns. So splash is always in serious newspapers onto 3 columns at minimum. Maximum, newspaper can decide whether we should add 1 more column as far as the size of the headline is concerned. And then after headline, you have, the lead and plus relevant picture also. So these 3 things together actually, this coverage is called, the splash of the main page. All right, moving ahead, then we have on the front page, it's good for the layout thing, that there are some pictures, they are given. Now those pictures, well, it depends, if it's a splash, of course, then picture is from the news which has taken, which has actually qualified the main news or the main story of the front page. But it depends, those pictures they can stand isolated also. I mean, picture a part of no news on the front page, picture in itself actually an independent story, that's possible. Or they can be, picture can be part of, secondary lead as well in certain cases. If there are 2 very important pieces of news on the front page, of course you have to decide, which one is the most important. I mean, the way we say, let's toss for it. Well, the one most important, is of course the main, and then second most important. So picture can be of the second most important piece of news also. All pictures are, given out there. A line is written, under the newspaper or above, a line is written under the picture or above the picture, which of course we call as the caption actually. Now that, line is written, to inform the readers actually that what this image is all about, what this, picture is actually all about. By the way, in serious newspapers, we do not print cartoons actually or artwork on the front page. Usually we avoid. We bring real life actually images and pictures so that, things could be rather more realistically and more tangibly be, stood and, perceived. Then after this, fiction, of course, there'll be secondary, important news, and then, its headline, its strap line, its subheadline, depends how it goes. Then, of course, when news is not covered full-fledged onto the front page, for example, then, the remaining part of the news, of course, runs somewhere inside page, and then, of course, under the news, a line is printed which actually represents, on which page of this newspaper, you can find the remaining part, let's say C page 9. The C page 9, as you can see also on the screen as well, this is called jump line actually. The circular, I have drawn a circle actually around a jump line. This is what actually is a direction for the reader to which page they should move to see, the remaining part of the news. Then, as far as typographical, tips and techniques concerned or measures concerned, as I told you that, of course, there is going to be the most important piece of news, which is the main story of the front page. There can be a secondary, second most important. Sometimes, there are pieces of news which are also very important, if not the of the prime importance actually, but still they are very important. They are affecting a huge, area of, people, huge number of people, for example. Then, of course, not all these pieces of news can be called as the main, stories of what. Of course, the size is going to be reduced. They may be of 1 column or 2 column size headline plus the story. But then, we apply some typographical techniques, to also make them, stand off the crowd, I mean to say, of the other pieces. I mean, to make it, more prominent. Sometimes, we draw, a box around that. We apply some screening thing also. Or we just draw broad lines, on their tops, on their heads actually, just to show, just to make it, highlighted, make it more prominent, make it stand actually off the remaining pieces of news. Such techniques actually are called as, kickers. Kickers are such techniques to make, parts of your news prominent, so that, just a single glance could give readers an idea that, which one, of course, is a main, which one is, second main, and which are smaller news but still very important. So these, of course, techniques are used. Something now very important, as I told you, like, early part of this lecture, that main, newspaper, main page actually is also known as, eyes of the newspaper. And eyes are, of course, index. What I actually meant by index was that on the front, page, some, the way like, we have in books, content page, or page of contents, or page of illustration, for example. Exactly the same way, on the main newspaper, main, page of the newspaper, you find menu column. Menu column can be like, 4 or 5 inch size column. And in that, they write actually what you can see inside. You can say some important, if there are some opinion articles are inside, if there's some important, let's say, feature has been like, covered, or if there are some supplements, inside, if there is any package magazine has been added to the newspaper, that like, can be, given out the piece of information, along with the page numbers, of course. This is called, the menu of the newspaper. Very idealistically speaking, about the front page, somebody, I don't know exactly the name of that person, of course it's anonymous, he was like, of the view that that day will be the death of newspaper, when advertisements, would creep into the main page of the newspaper. What we actually learn from this, main page of the newspaper, as we said, like, is the face of the newspaper, eyes of the newspaper, something, you can say, the facade, actually, of the whole paper journalism, It should not have advertisements on the front page, but as, of course, now, realistically speaking, of course, like, since, the newspaper people, they have to run the show, they have to, like, keep up with the time and the, requisites and the economic pressures, the all these challenges, see. So, of course, they have to have some commercial touches, add to commercial touches, to the newspapers. So at times, advertisements also, make their appearances on the front page. And when advertisements, of course, they appear on the front page, what happens? They, of course, eat up the space which originally should have been actually for, some those important pieces of news, which now have been buried somewhere inside. They could have been like, the front page, and could have been like, for the attention of the readers. Anyhow, this is what actually all about, your main page. So just to recapitulate what is on your main page, you have masthead, you have dateline, then you have the main headline, you can have strapline, subheadline on the top, or if there is, another headline below the main headline, that's also called subheadline. Then, of course, the lead, which is the main body of the story. If it's a splash coverage, then, of course, there'll be one image, also attached to the main, story. And then you can have second important, news story, or, of course, its headline and its, like, lead thing. You can have, some jump lines, a guidance where to see the remaining part of the piece of news. Then you can have some images which are independent, images, plus their captions are there. Menus are there, like, just like, table of contents thing. And then there are some techniques, which we use to make smaller size news pieces of, news which are still very important, just to make them prominent or highlight them, So this is how all that, is the main page. When we move inside of the newspaper, now inside there are, lots of pages, of different variety. Every page having, its own behavior, having its own, type of pieces of news. So, different, in different newspapers, you find different headlines or different labels, different names of inside papers. Of course, the rule of thumb for the inside pieces of news is, of course, these are such pieces of news which are, of course, less important. They are not as important as the pieces of news which are on the front page. You can see one example on your screen. This is one section of newspaper, and this is inside page, of course, and its section name is National. Okay, and you can see I have encircled the name of this page. So, of course, pieces of information, pieces of news which are, of national focus, actually, they will be printed on this, page. And this is, of course, will be of less important information. Then, if we move further, you can have, now on your screen, you can see, another inside page. And the name of this page is South Asia in Focus. Now, look here, the distance is now. Main page stories were such pieces of news, which we were directly affected. They were current, actually, and, they were very much in close proximity of, the readers. And then, the distance now increases from very close proximity, now we are moving away, to national level news, then to the regional level news. This is South Asia, actually, a country is in regional level. Then, if, possible, after regional, you then can go into, for example, Asia as a continent, that can be the coverage. And moreover, then after, this, let's say, continent, then the whole globe, of course, can be a focus. Then, of course, we'll be covering, that news which is of international importance. By the way, in all standard formal newspapers, you find all these separate sections. As I told you before, after the main page, separate section for national news, separate section for, now there's a choice, actually, South Asia or Asia, that news, and then, the global news or the international news. So this is how, inside pages, they are, set and, they are designed. One more very important page, we also call it, inside page. This is, we say city news, actually. City news, of course, paper which I receive in Lahore, for example. Then, let's say after the main, coverage, like the main page and then national and international news, then there'll be a separate section, actually, that could be in the form of a supplement, or that can be embedded very much, inside pages. Coverage, to the city news. Now, of course, this is, very localized sort of, information, and not everybody, of course, will be interested. Those, who belong to that very particular city, of course, they'll be very much interested. For them, that the city news, for example, if I'm, let's say, I belong to Lahore, for example. So the city page actually will be also like main page, in terms of importance for me. But people who belong to different cities, for example, for them, the city news or the city supplement, or the city section, for example, that would be, of course, I believe, tertiary importance, probably they would not even take a look of a single look of, that page. So, well, of course, in all standard, formal news, there are always, separate sections, for the city coverage. Like on your screen, you can take an example. This is, a page of a national newspaper, and you can see it has been, of course, headed out, as, of course, metropolitan, which actually means, of course, the news, concerned about, of course, the same very city. If the same newspaper, for example, is, printed, let's say, in Peshawar, over there, of course, the city of Peshawar, will be under coverage. And then, of course, people belonging to that very city, of course, will be primarily interested in And if I, for example, like, is a visitor, like, and in that city that very day, for me, of course, that section or that supplement or that very page actually, of course, will be of not secondary, maybe of tertiary actually importance. So this is how, this newspaper, like, gives place to the local news also. Then after this all comes very important page, I would say extremely important, the heart of the newspaper, I would say, that is the opinion page. This is also called as editorial page. Now, you can take a look of this editorial page. On this page, and again, masthead you can see, again, dateline you can see, then other important, facts, like, which are internal facts, and you can see. And then right under the masthead, there is a flow of, information with, of course, a headline. This is basically, the main editorial, of this page. Editorials can be, of course, in not just one. They can be like, two, they can be three. But the first editorial, then the second editorial, then the third editorial, of course, they are, organized in vertical formation. They are not in horizontal formation, So the first one will be the main, editorial of the day. Then you can find some essays also on this editorial page. They are called as, like, opinion articles. Then there can be some columns also. Sometimes, columns are not printed on this editorial paper. Sometimes, I'm saying, of course, they are printed, but sometimes they are not. Then they may be printed, on the left page of, editorial one. So this is how, like, it is, like, designed, and this is how editorials are, of course, organized. I would like to, like, give you more glimpses of this page. Like, first of all, I would like to show you one editorial. See, on your screen, you can see, like, masthead of the, newspaper. And right under the masthead, I have encircled in red. Now, this is what actually the editorial of this newspaper. By the way, editorial, of course, we have a separate actually session on editorials. But for your information, this is the opinion of the whole newspaper, and also the people who are working in that newspaper, the chief editor, editors, it's actually their, whole newspaper, let's say, group, for example. Therefore, not one person actually stands for it. Then, of course, byline actually is usually, omitted. It's not actually given. Then, one more item of editorial page, if I show you, is article. Now, this is not called simply an article. This is what we call as opinion article, actually. We use this article word, for two things. Like on the front page or even inside page, the pieces of news, they are also called as news article. Any piece of news, whether it's on the front page or it's inside, is called as, news article. But this article, like, which is printed actually on the editorial page, is opinion article. Now, of course, these are written by, of course, people who are, of course, specialists of the fields, They are intellectually strong and they are eminent writers, actually. They have their, like, eyes on to what is happening around them, locally, nationally, internationally. And, of course, the ingredient or the baseline of editorial also, of article also, is, of course, the news, the fundamental news, actually. So these people, like, they pick up important piece of news, and, of course, then they, like, write the whole sum. You can say they, in piece, of course, you have WH information only. But in opinion articles, of course, you can have subjective information also. That's why we call it opinion article. We do not use the word opinion for news article, because news articles got nothing to do with the opinions, actually. They are facts and figures. They are WH pieces of information, whereas opinion articles, that's the opinion of, let's say, Mr. ABC. You may agree or you may not agree with that Mr. ABC, but this is how Mr. ABC, like, views about that piece of news, and he tries to guide you actually, you know. So a whole lot of research actually is involved in writing of opinion articles. And I mean, moving ahead of this opinion articles, we of course can have, you know, other pieces like columns, very important. As I told you before, columns may be or may not be, you know, printed on, you know, this editorial page. But mostly, like, you know, of course, we see columns, a smaller column, you know, gets its place on editorial page. Now, column, of course, unlike opinion article, column is, first of all, also opinion of somebody. Column basically is extremely personalized opinion, whereas article is not that much personalized, you know, I mean to say opinion article, but columns are extremely personalized opinion of Mr. ABC. Now, that's why, like, you know, columns are always printed under fixed headline, I mean to say fixed name, you know, and mostly the photo or the picture of that columnist is also printed with, along with that person's contact number or that person's, you know, email thing. So these things these days, of course, you know, go by, you know, the column. Please keep in mind, editorial is the opinion of the whole newspaper group or the whole newspaper. This opinion article is the opinion of one person, his perception, his attempt to educate you about different occurrences, like, you know, around you. And column is something which is specialized opinion of somebody on some, you know, issue or some, you know, occurrence or some happening. You know, we have, we call it, you know, readership. Like, of course, newspapers, you know, they have their readership exactly the same way. There are authors, there are, like, you know, scholars, there are writers, there are columnists, you know, for example, article writers, for example. They also have their, like, you know, families. I mean to say, let's say if there is ABC article and I am the reader of that ABC, I impatiently, you know, wait for the day when, you know, so-and-so writer's article or so-and-so, like, you know, writer's column will appear, and of course I'll read for that. So, you know, they like create, you know, or set up sort of like, you know, families actually. So that is why, especially in column, you know, in articles also in certain newspapers, the contact numbers, I mean to say email number or, you know, phone number stuff, like, you know, is given so that, you know, people could also directly contact those writers or those columnists, you know, and could, you know, bring into the view, for example, some more issues, you know, which readers actually feel should be given due coverage, for example, or should be thrown light, more educated light, you know, by those, like, you know, writers, for example. So this is, of course, the editorial, you know, page thing. Then in some newspapers, but of course it doesn't happen actually in quality newspaper, a small section or a small space is given for readers actually point of views, which we call as, you know, letters to editors. Like somewhere in the bottom of the editorial page, a small piece can be, a small space actually can be given, and where, like, you know, some very important letters, you know, which also project and give words actually to some very important issues, very latest issues, you know, going on. So this letters to editors, you know, then of course they are important. Why? Because they bring some very important, you know, issues or some important, you know, problems into the view, into the notice of, you know, editor of the newspaper, and then, you know, of course they become part of the news indirectly, and later on, like, you know, maybe the newspapers, you know, they start printing, you know, they start giving coverage in the form of some follow-ups, and then, you know, of course, that stuff, like, you know, is given due space, of course, indirectly. So letters to editors, you know, they can be printed somewhere in the bottom section of the editorial page, or in some serious newspapers, for example, they are given, let's say, a place, a due place, I would say a substantial, space is given on a page which is on the left side of the editorial page. So over there, they can print, whole, lot of, letters to, editors, and then, of course, follow-ups are also run on to that, and, this is how people also contribute in sharing pieces of, news also. Okay, now after editorial page, I mean editorial, opinion article, column, letters to editor. Another very important item, or another very important, news type actually, which we call as the feature writing or the feature story. This is basically a research writing in which, I mentioned before, the baseline of editorial and opinion, article is the news that can be a major, minor piece of news. Exactly the same way for features also, the baseline is again a small story, okay? So what feature writers do actually, they really investigate into the matter. They collect information from all different, perspectives or aspects involved in that, piece of news. The background, information, the current status of that matter, and the futuristics also. They conduct interviews as well. They conduct, surveys also. Then lots of illustrations as well they add to. For example, some pictures they can add to. They can give special space to some graphic representation also. So a feature writing or a feature actually gives you full length of news. Now, full length news actually means a piece of news which has been given such a coverage that not any single aspect is left out. So feature writing actually is, in the real sense of the word, investigative, reporting. Let's now move ahead after this feature thing. Then we have now some, some special sections, some specialized sections of newspapers. For example, a special section for business news. You can see on your screen, this is an example of, a business section. And then this example is actually an example of sports section. By the way, on these two supplements, you can also call them supplements, but they are supplements are slightly, different, from these. They are very much part of the main, newspaper, section. Inside this, you can have business or sports news also. You can have, business related or sports related opinion articles also, and you can have some columns as well. For example, there are sports columnists, so the columns are regularly printed actually, if not regularly, every week they are printed onto the sports page. Then moving ahead, we have some showbiz pages. I mean, all pieces are all news about showbiz, the life of actors and actresses, what is in, what is out, and there can be some special section on showbiz about fashion also. This is something very in these days, so that also is getting a substantial space in the newspapers, because now we have a huge readership, which is very much interested in knowing about, the newly, fashion-related trends and all. And then we can have, fun page also. I mean, of course, so far, we accept this showbiz thing, we have been, talking about the serious stuff of the newspaper. There is some, light part of the newspaper, and that we of course, call as fun page. You can have some cartoons on it. You can have some jokes also. You can have some, jumbled. You can have word games. So all that, stuff is printed onto the fun page. Moving onwards, newspaper gives you sections. They may be dispersed sections, or it's possible that, they are printed all together on the same page. This we call as, guides or guide sections. For example, the prayer timings, let's say, or horoscope, for example, about weathers, flight timings, what we call as like money matters, for example, conversions like dollar into pounds and pounds into rupees, that conversion stuff is given. So these guides are, in most newspapers, they're dispersed actually. Somewhere you find prayer timing, somewhere you find, horoscope. And in some newspapers, these things, for example, horoscope, for example, this weather reports, they are printed on the fun page or the side of the fun page. And this money conversion thing is given a place on business section. But at the same time, in certain newspapers, they are dispersed actually on every one item you can find on every new page, for example. Moving ahead, we have another important part of newspaper we call as paper or a page or a section, meant for advertisements actually. This is something very, very important. The classified advertisements, for example, for, if you want to sell, you want to buy, you want to rent out things, you want to announce things, for example, or you want to, yes, important thing, you want to hunt a job, for example, you want to see any openings. So this page is actually meant for all these announcements actually. Announcements can be about that very city. They can be about national level or international level. That doesn't matter. But that section actually is meant for, advertisements. Then comes, I was using the word supplements actually. See, these days newspapers are, given in the form of packages. Packages means not just the main newspaper. I mean to say main newspaper means, 7-8 pages, for example. Main page, of course, the end page, and then there are some insiders, for example, national and international, and editorial page, with one column, one or two editorial, one or two articles, maybe somewhere one feature. That's, of course, the main page, main newspaper, actually. But these days, it's a competitive world, actually, see. So newspapers, newspaper people, actually, they try to sell their newspapers in package form. Package means, every day you find, let's say, one supplement, or you find, a small magazine, small size magazine with it. This is called selling newspaper in package. Like on your screen, you can see there is one special business supplement they can add to, or there is one special supplement, on which, let's say, some more feature type stories can be printed, or there can be some magazines also. Especially when we talk about the local coverage, for example, let's say in Lahore, take the example. If there is any local festival going on, so there can be a special supplement, added to the newspaper locally. If something is happening, nationally, for example, so there can be supplement covering that national level occurrence or happening, can be, of course, covered and, added to the newspaper. So this is what actually called newspaper. These days are actually offered in package form. And then moving ahead, there is one section, small section. This is exactly not a section, but you can say an item, which is also obituary, actually, in which people who have passed away, the loved ones, their space, through which, you can tell mass that, so-and-so person has passed away, and these could be the timings for his funeral, blah, blah, blah. Or people have died in a long time before, so their loved ones, of course, they can express their sweet memories, and they can add sweet words and prayers also to this section. And this is how they can tie themselves up again with those who are no more in their families. So this obituary thing is of course part and parcel of every newspaper. Moving ahead, newspapers, just to recapitulate now, I think I would like to give you bird eye view of what, or review of what we have talked about, that newspapers, whether they are serious or they are, quality, I mean to say popular, for example, of course they have some, standardized, sections in them, which I have just counted in front of you. Starting from, of course, the main page. This page is meant for the most important news, and Here you have the main story also printed. Here you have the menu also, the content thing from where like you can get to know what is inside. And then, another important section, national, international news. Then another very important editorial page where like, you find that news groups like, point of view, along with some opinion articles are there, like, writings of some eminent scholars on different, issues. Then you have some columns also, which are very specialized opinion articles, and then letters to, editors. This is a section, sort of an opportunity, like, which newspaper people, like, they offer to the readers also to get involved, to participate also, to become a party also in a way, and also to contribute in the sense that, of course, newspaper cannot reach everywhere in this, in the point of view of like, covering different aspects. So people can also bring into the notice of, editors, like, what is happening, and on which issue, like, should be, which issue, like, should be part of the newspaper and should have, like, debates on, stuff like that. And then, you can move ahead to some other sections, which we call as, let's say the supplements. You can have special business supplements. You can have sports is one section important as a supplement. As I told you before, in these, like, pages also you have some specialized articles and some specialized, columns present. And then, there are, like, other important part of newspaper, like, fun pages. These are the lighter part of the papers. Here you find, different cartoons, different announcements, for example. You can find information about TV channels, like, what will be shown, what time, all that piece. And you can find, on the same page, you sometimes find reviews also, reviews of movies, reviews of, different songs also. And then some magazines things, they can also be there, in which, whole length of coverage of different sorts, like, is given. That's a different, by the way, new magazine, of course, is a different, like, discussion someday, of course, we'll have on it. So this is all, like, about the parts of newspaper, which we are studying under the language of newspapers. I hope, like, you enjoyed today's, this, class on parts. And I would expect from you that, the newspaper, like, which reaches your home, just go through it and try to relate, like, what we have actually studied in this class. With this, take care of yourself. See you next time. Bye-bye.